So now we've discussed directory coherence at a high level, as well as how to represent the directory state using different kind of structures. In this video, we will discuss how the coherence protocol itself is implemented. So this gives sort of a high-level picture of how a system implementing directory-based coherence could be implemented. Down on the CPU side, we have a protocol fairly similar to the CPU protocol we had in the Snoopy case. So sometimes that protocol needs to send out transactions. Sometimes there will be transactions received from the directory. So there's some extra kind of services that protocol will have to implement. But as you see here, there is no snooping protocol here. It's just an out buffer and an in buffer storing messages from the directory. This interconnect, as we discussed before, is just a general interconnect. It's not a broadcast interconnect. And it just allows us to send point-to-point messages from a CPU to the directory or from the directory to the CPU, but never from CPU to CPU. So at the memory side, we have the directory protocol or home protocol implemented. And so after we receive a request here, we will have to do some directory state lookup. And based on that directory state, we may decide to send out some transactions to one or many of the CPUs. So just as for the Snoopy cache coherence protocol, we have some the similar kind of cache states. So there's still a cache per state per cache line stored in the caches. So we have the modify, exclusive, owned, shared, and invalid, and the interpretation of these cache lines are exactly the same as for the Snoopy-based protocol. We also typically implement the same kind of flavors of protocols: MOSI, MSI, MOESI, and MESI, and other letter combinations as well. But there is not a huge difference between the protocol. Maybe the largest difference is that cache-to-cache transfers don't make as much sense when you have a directory-based protocol as a Snoopy-based protocol. So you are more likely to implement a MESI kind of protocol rather than a MOSI kind of protocol when you have a directory-based implementation. Looking at the state transition diagrams that we've seen before for the Snoopy-based coherence, on the CPU side, as already said, it's fairly similar. We have the CPU read, CPU write, and CPU replacement. That's going to cause actions at the bottom of the protocol here. And here I simply just replaced the word bus by directory. So this means that if you're in state invalid and you see CPU read from your own processor, you will send out a read to share request to the directory and you will go to state shared. We're going to look at a few examples of how you can implement the protocol, and looking at directory protocols at a high level is much harder than looking at Snoopy-based protocols at a high level. So what we'll do here is that we're going to look at a few cases, and for each case we're going to see what kind of action the local node would take. So this is the node where the requesting CPU is. We would see what actions that the home node would take, the H, and the home node is where the directory sits. And we'll also see what actions remote CPU nodes will take. So there will be messages sent from directory to some remote nodes, and they will take some actions. So here's an example of what may happen. And this example is a read to write example where the data is shared by many nodes and it's dirty in one of the nodes. So what will happen here is step number one is that the local node, the requesting node, will send out a directory read to write request to the home node. The home node will do a lookup in the directory and it will figure out that this is indeed a a request to a cache line which is shared in many nodes, and more specifically in one of those nodes it's dirty, so the we have to have a node reply with the data to the request. We can't get the node from the local memory. So the home node will take two actions. It will send out the CPU read to write request to one of the nodes, the node that's in the own state. That node will reply with the data to the requester. The other nodes will be sent a CPU invalidate request at the same time as the CPU read to write request is sent out. CPU invalidate request, because they're going to get invalidated, and they reply to the local node by just sending acknowledges, so that the local node can know when all the data have been deleted, and then that's the point in time receiving all the acknowledges as well as the data. That's the point in time when it actually can start to modify this piece of data. And then the local node will send an acknowledge back to the home again, just to acknowledge that it's performed all everything is clear, its request has been fulfilled, and it's very happy. That's what this acknowledge says. Another example, a little bit simpler, is an example where the read to write request, where we have other shared nodes, but we can also see that the data in the local memory is clean. So here we start the same way. We get the directory read to write request to the home node. The home node finds out that it's shared and clean. So the home node knows that it can reply with data. So it's going to do that right away. And it's going to send out invalidation messages to whoever nodes has a shared copy, and they will send acknowledges back. Similarly, if you get read to share request and it's remote dirty, well, the local node is going to send a directory read to share. The home node is going to, after looking in its directory, figure out that it needs to send a CPU read to share request to the node where the dirty data resides, and then it will reply with the data back to the requester. Likewise, there are simpler cases here. So if it's home clean, then we need to send a directory request to the home node, and the home node will reply with the data, and the local node will send the acknowledge back to the home node. So it's always, start off with some kind of request, and the transactions always end with some kind of acknowledge being sent back to the home node. Finally, we have the write back request here, and the write back request, it's caused by replacement to some dirty data in the cache in the local node. And when that happens, we simply need to write the data back to the home node by sending a write back request that contains the data as well. So these are description at a high level, what actions are you need to take, and of course we're not covering all cases in just these few examples. There are lots and lots of very interesting corner cases when you design a directory-based cache coherence protocol. So let's look at the simple example again, read to share dirt in the remote cache. So here we have a directory read to share request sent to the home node. It does a lookup in its directory, and it says, gee, this data is dirty, I better send it to the remote node where the dirty data resides. So we send it CPU read to share request. However, just before this CPU read to share request happens, Murphy has been unkind to us and has forced an eviction of exactly this cache line from the remote node. So now the remote node has already sent away the data using a directory write back to the home node. So now when the remote node gets a CPU read to share, it's going to look up in its cache and say, I don't have this cache line in a dirty state. Actually, I don't have this cache line at all, because it must have been replaced. So the requesting node now has detected a corner case. So what it will have to do is to report back the sad news to the home node by sending a directory message saying, I tried to read cache data, but it was gone. Okay? So sort of chasing the data that was just recently written back to the home node with this new request. However, while this transaction is in the air, some other local node here, may decide to do a directory read to write request for exactly the same cache line. So the data has already been sent from the home node to this blue node, and now this data copy is the dirty data copy in the system, and this newly panic message that was sent to the home nodes, cannot be fulfilled because we have to sort of go on and chase the data back to the blue node. So after you get the directory, I tried to read cache data, but it was gone message, then we should try to chase the data where it's dirty right now. So we send a new CPU read to share request to that node. However, Murphy has been involved once more, and this piece of data has also been replaced, causing a write back before the new read to share request arrived at the blue node, and so on. So as you see here, there can be it's hard to handle all the corner cases, everything that can happen here, and most of all, it's very hard to guarantee forward progress. You can imagine a system where this chasing after the data could go on forever if Murphy is involved, and it's hard to put an upper bound on how long time it would take to fulfill a simple request like directory read to share to data which is dirty in another node. So lots of interesting corner cases, and of course I could have continued drawing this example with more corner cases, but I think that you got the point now that things could get really messy. So where can things get messy? So when you implement this protocol, so in the home protocol, you must be prepared to get these sort of confused messages back, saying a message saying I tried to read the data, but it was gone. Those kind of messages. So you cannot only design for the simple case where we get to read to shares and read to write requests. Also, down in the CPU protocols, you must also handle these corner cases. So there could be a read to share CPU read to share request being sent down here saying that I suspect that you have some dirty data and I want you to dig that data out and forward that data to some other CPU. But as we already see in this example, there could be corner cases here as well. So the corner cases will not just be up in the home protocol, but will also spread to the CPUs themselves. So which statements are true about directory-based coherence? So this is one or many of these statements that is correct. Take some time, answer this, and I'll explain the correct answer afterwards. So actually, it's all of these that are correct. So, from a cache state point of view, the implementation of directory-based coherence and Snoopy-based coherence is very similar. So the state stored here associated with the cache lines are very much the same. The lookup of directory state, as we saw in the previous video, can be accelerated by directory caches. There are typically more corner cases here than we saw in the Snoopy protocol. In the Snoopy protocol, we handled 2 corner cases. And here we already outlined many more possible corner cases than that. And yes, the coherence implemented by directory-based protocols are much more suitable for implementation across larger physical distances. So In this course, we've not covered directory protocols to any more detail than what we discussed here. It takes much more than just staring at the state transition diagram to really understand what's going on in a directory-based protocol. Typically, the directory-based protocols are specified by some sort of coding style example, so it looks more like a program when you specify them rather than state transitions diagrams. And that's how you implement it as well. When you implement hardware, you use a hardware description language, which is, looks more like the imperative languages that we normally use. So it's from an implementation point of view, describing something in text is not a problem. There are many interesting corner cases, as I said, and often when you do the implementation of the protocols, you introduce some transient states, so you can catch these interesting corner cases. So these are states that are not visible from an outside viewer. It still looks like a MOSI protocol or a MOESI protocol or whatever protocol you implement. But for example, when you do a store to a cache line in state S, well, you need to send out an invalidation signal. But you can possibly also go to a new state S on my way to M, such that if you get a request from the outside world, you know sort of what your intentions are for this cache line, and the way you reply and handle these kind of corner cases may depend exactly which state transition you're in the middle of. Finally, I'm going to just briefly mention a technique used in a protocol called a deterministic directory protocol. So we're going to look at that implementation that was done in WildFire in the next set of videos. And the interesting thing here is there are two interesting things. One is there is no transient states in the explicitly encoded in this protocol, and there actually are no corner cases. So what's happening here is in this directory protocol, you implement what's called blocking at the directory. So you only allow for one outstanding transaction per cache line at the directory. So if there is already one ongoing transaction for a cache line and a new request comes in at the directory, we're going to block that second request until we get a completion saying that the first transaction that's out in the air has been received. So this is what it looks like. So similar to the examples we saw before, how you can implement directory-based coherence. First, we have some kind of request that's sent to the home node, and the home node, if it's in the example where you have where it's remote dirty, it may send out a demand to a remote node and some other maybe invalidations to other remote nodes. So this looks very similar to the protocol we had before. And then at the end of the day, we send a completion, sort of an acknowledge back to the home node. The difference here is that after we've received the request at the home node and decided that we're going to service that request, we're going to set a bit in the home directory for that cache line, saying this cache line is now blocked. If you receive further requests for that cache line, you cannot start to handle those requests. They are going to have to stay in some buffer somewhere or in some queue somewhere waiting for this completion to happen. Same thing, remote dirty, you're going to have the same kind of requests. First a request, then a demand, then a reply, possibly with some data, ended by completion. And the same thing is going to happen here. We cannot start to service this request until the directory entry has the blocking bit cleared from any previous transactions. And at that point in time, we will start to send out this request, the demand request, at the same time block the directory again. An interesting thing is how write-back is implemented. So when you implement write-back, instead of just sending a write-back to the home node, what you will start with is to send out the request to the home node, saying the request encodes a wish to perform a write-back. So this request sends, please let me send a write-back. The home node may send an acknowledge back saying, it's okay, you can now send me the data, or could send a NACK back saying, I know that you were only kidding. You no longer have possession over this cache line, and I know it. So you can now stop your silliness. And as a, so the data will only be sent to the home node after the home node sort of has been requesting that data. So the data will actually stay in the local node until the home says it's okay for this write back to start to do its action. So this has a very interesting property, and that's why it's called the deterministic directory. Whatever view the directory has of who has a piece of data, where is it dirty, has it been modified, that view is always in agreement with all the CPUs, all the remote nodes, because the remote nodes will not change their state until they explicitly be told so by directory. And most node, the more important transaction is the write back transaction. The write back, the data will not leave the local node. If it will stay there, it will be dirty. It can be, you can answer requests from other nodes in the local node until the directory, the home node, says now it's the time to get rid of that data. So it's one exception for this. So we typically implement what's called silent replacement in cache coherence. So if you're in state shared and you get replaced, that means that you do not have to tell the directory that this replacement is taking place. Instead, you just make the state change from shared to invalid. And since the directory hasn't been notified, the directory will still believe that you have a shared copy of the cache line. So down the road, it's possible that the directory will send an invalidation signal to you, even though you already have this cache line in state invalid. This is not a corner case. You have been told to invalidate something that is already in state invalid. So that can be regarded as a quite normal situation. So we're going to discuss this protocol in a little more detail when we talk about wildfire during the next lecture.